Okay, good evening, EO44. I hope you had a good time in making your assignment in your asynchronous class last time. So we will be picking up some of your works now as part of this chapter. We will be proceeding with the next chapter. Now we discussed chapter 5 as the probability in statistics. Now we will be discussing chapter 6 now, of psychological statistics. With our explanation before, no, we know that statistics is not only about collecting data. Uh, and the main purpose of this, now that's why psychological statistics is included in your curriculum, is that the main purpose of this is to help us test a claim or idea about our world, no, the real world. Our objective for tonight is to explain hypothesis and hypothesis testing. We will also explain how to reject or accept the null hypothesis that we are going to create. And we will apply an appropriate statistical test for the hypothesis. And later on in this chapter, we will generate the procedure for the hypothesis testing. No, like the other chapters that we have, now we will be understanding the formula and the step-by-step of generating the decision for the hypothesis testing. That's why the result of your asynchronous class last time would be used. No, I ask you to create your hypothesis. We will discuss that as part of this chapter. Okay, so moving on, let's define hypothesis. A hypothesis is a tentative explanation or a prediction about the relationship between two or more variables. It gives direction to a study, to a research, by predicting how one factor may influence another. Na, it is a statement that can be tested through observation, through experimentation, and through statistical analysis. Um, for example, di ba, if you will look at our world, no, around, no, there are simple a prediction or simple explanation, no, that you can create, no. That's hypothesis. Okay, now what are the basic concept of hypothesis? No, a hypothesis is an educated guess, no. Hypothesis is part of when during our elementary days, no, we were asked to make a scientific method, and part of scientific method is hypothesis creation of hypothesis, no? Because why it's educated guess, we use fact, no? We use experiment, no? We use scientific processes to have a good or to have a credible result. That's why hypothesis is an educated guess or a prediction about a relationship between the variables. And another basic concept of hypothesis is that it must be testable. Now, it could be by experiment, no, by observation, by a survey, by measuring tools, or by all means. No, but it should be testable. That's the basic concept of hypothesis. So, la- class, from your assignment, no, with your asynchronous activity last time. So let me hear example from hypothesis you made in your asynchronous activities. Can I see hands from the class, please? Okay, so a lot of you has written their hypothesis. No, some I saw a new example would be if there is a new medicine. Not hypothesis would be a new medicine will reduce fever faster than the old one. No, if they will challenge the top brand, no, that's a hypothesis. No, for example, a student who take morning classes will perform better than those in the evening. No, probably because they're exhausted, or probably because they will be more busy, no, in the evening. No, depende. Well, like you, EO44, you are evening class. So is that for you ba? Is that a right hypothesis? Mas magagaling ba yung mga morning classes than you, comparing it to you? So that is a hypothesis. Okay, so that is the basic concept of hypothesis. So how we are going to test if we have a good quality hypothesis. Now, quality of a good hypothesis now contains an if and then relationship. Na nag-start siya sa if, tapos in between there connecting the then na word as the relationship to one another. It also identifies, now we will give example later on. It will also identify in the IB, or the independent variable, and the dependent variable. Now, where the independent variable is the cost, and the dependent variable is the effect. It can also be tested, as mentioned. That's part of the concept. It can also be tested using scientific methods. And lastly, the good qualities of a good hypothesis is also based in existing research or evidence. Now, with your future thesis or research, now, when you are going to create your uh, RLL, or the review of related literature, so that you can create your gap. No, there will be lots of research references that you have to make, and you have to make a hypothesis that is based on the previous research. Okay. So it is usually written as an if and then statement, like if I change not the independent variable, then the dependent variable will change. Now, if I decrease the amount of water to sa mga mahilig magtanim, if I decrease the amount of water, then the plants will grow slower. That's a hypothesis. Another example is, well, with the psychology practitioners. No, if patients no, receives counseling in addition to the medication no, that was given by a psychiatrist, then their depression will decrease. That's another hypothesis. So those are the qualities of a good hypothesis. In chapter 2, no, or in chapter 1, when we discuss the variables, we identify na the difference of the variables, but this is some sort of a review for you. IB, or independent variable, are the factor that the researcher, or that we no, change or categorizes to observe the effect. For example, ano ba yung mga independent variable na available? For students, the amount of study time. No? For patient or for client in psychology, the type of therapy that we are giving to our patients. Or for us, for teacher, the teaching method that we are using. Those are independent variable. Yun yung susukatin natin, or yun yung itetest natin. While the dependent variable is the effect or the result, no, or the outcome, as it's written here, is the outcome or effect that is measured. The outcome or effect that is measured. For example, for study time, na test scores are dependent variable. Kasi yan yung susukatin mo dun sa study time nila. Level of anxiety for our practitioners to check the type of therapy that is effective, and the student performance for us, for teachers to check if what would be the result of a teaching method. So that's the difference between the IB and the DB, or the IB. Take note, IB is the cost or the input, and the DV is the effect or the result of the test. So we have to correctly identify these variables when we are doing hypothesis, no? For us to ensure that our hypothesis is clearly stated and what is being changed and what is being observed. So identify the variables. These are the examples of your variables. Now, halimbawa, kami, no, a teacher wants to know if using a new teaching method improves quiz score. Now, let's compare the traditional one and the online teaching style or the online teaching method that we have now. So, what would be my IB or my in the independent variable? That would be the teaching method, no, the traditional versus the online teaching method that we're using. So what would be the TV or the dependent variable? We can measure it by the quiz scores of the students. So sasabayin mo yan, I will teach traditional with the same class, I will check the quiz score. Then I will use online teaching, then I will check the quiz score. So ganon ginagamit yung IBN DB. So the hypothesis that you can produce from this topic or from this subject would be there is no difference in quiz scores between the two methods. No? That's one hypothesis. Another hypothesis is yung student that were taught with the new method will score higher. So why there are two hypotheses? Now, this hypothesis, well, hypothesis if plural, hypothesis if singular. Now take note of that. Why there are two hypotheses in this example? In our definition of terms or the three keywords that we're going to encounter in hypothesis, no, in hypothesis testing, um, we will include, no, the two hypotheses that we will be using as part of the tricky problems that we're going to discuss as part of the definition of terms of the hypothesis testing. So the two hypotheses are, well, number one is yung nauna, that's null hypothesis. Null hypothesis is represented by HO or null hypothesis. Pagka null hypothesis, this is a clear statement about the relationship between the two or more statistical object, which typically states that there is no relationship or effect between variables. Take note of that. There is no relationship or there is no difference, no, between the variables pagka null hypothesis. On the other hand, yung alternative hypothesis or H1, na this is essentially the statement that the null hypothesis is false. Nakabaliktaran naman siya ng null hypothesis. It is represented by H1 in formulas or in writings. H1 states that there is an effect, there is a difference, or there is a relationship between the variables that we are studying. So that's the difference of the two. Null hypothesis, there's no effect. The alternative hypothesis will have an effect dun sa variable na ini-study natin. Now, why do I need to mention this? Because with our hypothesis testing, these two, particularly the null hypothesis, is the one that we are going to test and that we are going to compute later on for our decision. I mean, for our decision and the discussion of the result. And that would be our next discussion.